To provide some background on myself before we begin today's presentation, I am a senior at East Tennessee State University, and I am pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Computing with a concentration in Computer Science. The reason for today's presentation is for my Software Engineering 2 class. Now that I've given a little background on myself, let's get started. I have chosen my presentation topic on Infrastructure as a Service, which is commonly abbreviated just as IaaS. Infrastructure as a Service is a cloud computing service and is often just referred to as hardware as a service, and the two terms can be coupled together. The main difference being that infrastructure can be a broad definition that can encompass the many add-in services that go along with having a vendor provide hardware needs. For my presentation, I will be splitting it into 5 components, starting with cloud computing. Then I will delve into what infrastructure as a service is, which will lead into some context and history associated with it. From there, I will address some prevalent questions and misconceptions surrounding infrastructure as a service. And finally, give my concluding remarks. So what is cloud computing? According to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. Things like networks, servers, storage, applications, and services are all computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. Cloud computing can be split into 3 models: IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS. Cloud service providers commonly use pay-as-you-go models, meaning there is no fixed price. Instead, pay-as-you-go can be viewed as a flexible model where the resources you consume are the resources that you pay for. So what's the difference between these cloud computing models? SaaS, which stands for Software as a Service. Software as a Service examples include applications like Microsoft 365 or Discord. PaaS stands for Platform as a Service. Platform as a Service is an all-encompassing service where the user has minimal effort in what is happening behind the scenes. Almost everything is left up to the cloud service provider. Platform as a Service can be viewed as a way for the developers to create and deploy. Microsoft Azure App Services is an example of a platform as a service. With platform as a service, all the infrastructure is kept behind the scenes and abstracted away from the developer. IaaS stands for Infrastructure as a Service. Infrastructure as a Service is more hands-on without it actually being hands-on because there's no physical hands-on. Everything is essentially in the cloud. It is still considered very hands-on because of all the configurations that have to be accounted for. With infrastructure as a service, the configurations are configured using virtualization software. The configurations themselves are handled using dashboards or user interfaces. Just to give some exposure to some popular cloud service providers, there are several different vendors, with Amazon Web Services being the top provider, and according to Statistica in 2022, AWS made up 40% of the market share for infrastructure as a service. Microsoft Azure made 21.5%, and Google Cloud made 7.5% of the market share. So what is infrastructure as a service? As stated before, infrastructure as a service encompasses a broad range of hardware services. As with other cloud computing models, the pay-as-you-go framework is especially important when it comes to hardware, because hardware can get expensive quite fast. Infrastructure that can be provided are servers, networks, load balancers, and storage, among others. So why use infrastructure as a service? Infrastructure as a service provides greater scalability of infrastructure needs. Using infrastructure as a service means you can adjust to your business needs as they come and go. As a company's needs fluctuate, infrastructure will need to be expanded or minimized. This leads infrastructure as a service to be the best choice for cost effectiveness. As business needs change, the infrastructure will have to be scaled up or scaled down, and using a cloud service provider provides great flexibility in the maintenance of the infrastructure. As businesses grow exponentially, the resources will have to be accounted for as well. Not only is infrastructure as a service incredibly scalable, but is incredibly swift due to it being in the cloud. Rather than having to integrate new physical hardware on-premise with infrastructure as a service, deployment is done technically in a few clicks. For some context and history of infrastructure as a service, in the past 10 years, enterprises have shifted to using infrastructure as a service instead of on-premise data centers, leading to incredible operational enhancements. Maybe not quite like these two pictures. I don't think enterprises are going from that messy to that organized. Netflix is just one of the many corporations that have made the transition. Netflix tried to build their own data centers in 2007, but could not keep up with demand. And a year later, Netflix encountered a database corruption, which led to a 3-day downtime. That's a lot of money. After this, Netflix made the transition to AWS. This is just one of the examples of corporations that have made the transition. Prevalent questions and misconceptions. It is a common misconception that having an on-premise data center means it will be more secure, but in reality, cloud service providers heavily invest in security measures and often provide more security over on-site data centers. Another misconception is that using infrastructure as a service means losing control over infrastructure. But this is not the case. While the physical hardware is not accessible, due to virtualization, everything can be configured, and the accessibility of the hardware is not necessary. Another misconception is that infrastructure as a service is always cost-effective. While infrastructure as a service is cost-effective if used correctly, the customer is still responsible for scaling and keeping resources managed correctly. How do I know I won't be paying for something like this to happen? Cloud service providers have measures in place to ensure control over infrastructure in the instance of disasters. Service level agreements are in place for this reason. A service level agreement is a contract between the cloud service provider and the customer. The agreement provides a negotiation on what each party is responsible for and what they are not responsible for. When choosing a cloud service provider, things like performance, security, disaster recovery, support, and penalties are all issues that need to be considered when viewing a service level agreement. Conclusion. Cloud computing is often seen as a scary subject, but in reality, just as any topic, it can be broken down using the models. Cloud computing can be broken down based on business needs. Cloud service providers help with the overhead of choosing what is needed. In the case of infrastructure as a service, cloud computing makes things easier and provides simplicity to what is often seen as a scary subject. Infrastructure as a service is a resource that any size company should be utilizing. Infrastructure as a service is commonly viewed as a large corporation solution, when in reality, it is suitable for any size company. Because of the scalability and the simplicity that cloud service providers ensure, it can be viewed as a solution for any size company. As infrastructure as a service and cloud computing in general continues to grow, we can be hopeful that competition between providers will lead to increased security and better pricing models. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation.